Well, the Michigan House of Representatives returned to work and has started a new session with many new faces in the group. One familiar face was not there when the new session began, but he's here this morning, and we'll be talking with him starting right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Ed McBroom was elected to the Michigan House of Representatives in 2010, and since then has served 3 terms representing the people in Michigan's 108th District, which includes Delta, Dickinson, and Menominee counties. By trade, McBroom is a dairy farmer from Dickinson County who was involved as a member of the Michigan Farm Bureau's Young Farmers Program across the UP when he made the decision to get involved and throw his hat in the political ring. I thought it would be interesting today to look back on his service in Lansing as well as get his thoughts on what lies ahead. Ed McBroom, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
Thanks so much for having me, Don. Great to be here.
I have to ask you right off the bat, I know you're a dedicated dairy farmer. Have you sensed that the cows are happier that they're seeing more of you?
I don't know how they feel about it. They have a lot on their mind, I guess. Lots of chewing to do.
Yeah, lots of chewing. Before we get to politics, I should ask you, what are the keys to running a successful dairy farm?
Well, there's the obvious, I suppose, which is to make more money in the milk you sell than what it costs to make it. But for us, I work very hard on keeping good records, knowing what each of my cows is capable of, knowing who makes the cut and who doesn't, and working hard to breed better cows the next generation. But it's also being able to grow good crops and have good feed for the cows, to do a good job raising the replacement animals, the calves. And there's just a lot to do, but it's a great place for a family, and we have a great opportunity. We're very blessed.
Are there any challenges facing the dairy industry today?
Right now there's a tremendous amount of pressures economic-wise from milk products that are coming in from other countries. There's the difficulties with products that call themselves milk that aren't milk, such as plant extracts, whether it's soy or peanut. There's a lot of other labeling issues and a lot of just false information that's spread to the public to confuse them about what's healthy and what's not when it comes to milk. A lot of label farces that are out there that deceive you into thinking, well, our farmers promise to do this, and therefore anybody who doesn't promise must not be doing a good job. And so we deal with a lot of that absence labeling, we call it, and it's disappointing because it's kind of the industry cannibalizing itself, and it's not honest. All milk is healthy and safe and good for people. We are very proud of that in our industry.
Well, you spent the last 6 years in Lansing, and I want to get some insights from you into what that's like. I did have a chance to see a farewell address you gave to your colleagues in Lansing. It was on the internet, and I learned several things. First of all, I sense that your religious beliefs are very important to you.
Yeah, it's something that for me is so critical to, I guess, my worldview, to knowing who I am, to being able to identify what issues are issues you can compromise on and which ones aren't, and how just a set of values to judge everything that goes on by. I grew up in a Christian home, and church has always been a very big and important part of my life. Christ has been an important part of my life and remains there. And when I went to Lansing, I didn't leave him behind.
Okay. You said some nice things to your colleagues, but you also raised some issues and concerns, and we probably could not cover all of that in the time we have today. But what was the main message you wanted to leave with them?
I wanted to come back to a message that was really something I started off with when I first began campaigning in 2010. And that's that when we're involved with government, I mean, it's a special thing that we have in America to govern ourselves. And it really incorporates that value of loving your neighbor as yourself. And the rules of procedure and process and the Constitution itself are a set of guidelines and rules that are in place to make sure that we do that the majority never becomes a tyrannical, and that the minority always has its opportunity to have its say and to be persuasive. And I feel especially because of term limits and loss of memory, we have a real hard time now in the Michigan legislature doing things that are real in front of everybody. And instead things become very scripted, very choreographed, and speeches are given without any sort of intent to actually persuade anybody that perhaps this point of view would be worth considering and adapting or modifying your own point of view. I always believe that a speech should be persuasive and deliver information that you felt another person needed to have to make a more accurate decision. But so much of what goes on is just for the cameras and isn't real anymore.
You seem to be making a point that maybe the leadership has too much control.
I think that's become part of the problem in the term-limited era, that everyone is there such a short amount of time, and the amount of people who will ever get to be leader, regardless of which party is in power, is extremely limited. And it really then has become so important to the party, both parties, that their leadership be very, very controlling over what its individual members are doing to not jeopardize their opportunity to have the majority for that very brief window. And it doesn't allow an individual member who's there representing his district the full freedom he'd have to say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice what I could accomplish this term because what you're pushing me to do is so egregious to me. Instead, he has to say, well, this may be the only term, or I only have 1 or 2 left, and you'll still be the leader the next time. Therefore, if I ever want to get anything done for my district, I have to really weigh that what you want me to do, though I don't like it, I may need to do it or I will never be relevant here at all.
Okay. I want to follow up on that, and particularly on term limits, but we have to take a break.
All
Back
right.
with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Talking with State Representative Ed McBroom, who just finished up his term in Lansing. We were talking about term limits. Let's talk about that a little bit. You were forced to leave because of term limits, as many others have been.
That's right.
Are term limits good or bad?
I believe that term limits in Michigan at their current setting are bad.
Okay.
I can see value to them, but they're so short in Michigan. We have the shortest ones in the whole country, and they're very, very problematic. They really take individual members' ability to be completely independent, function independently away from them. And it also leads to just very short-sighted decision-making from either party. And we take the road funding issue, for instance. Michigan's had a problem with the road funding that it passed back in 1997, almost immediately after it passed it in 1997, certainly within 5 years. And so it's been 20 years, and we could just barely get a mediocre fix done here the last term. But every year you get 40 to 60 new people in the House out of 110 every 2 years.
Right.
And the people with the maximum amount of experience when they start any given term is 4 years. And I remember sitting there my last term going over, we're trying to work out these ideas, and all the folks who are new, been there 6 months, are like, well, let's try this or this or this. And I'm like, yeah, I suggested that too my first year. And you just sit there because you know you're not going to persuade them that because it didn't work when you thought of it, that it might not work when they try it.
You can almost have a situation where the majority of the House are new members in some years.
It happens. And I mean, we're looking at almost 30 of the 38 senators terming out here in 2 more years.
Okay.
And I just believe it's made I don't believe you can show any evidence that it's made Michigan's government function better, work better for the people. We had 2 members expelled, several who resigned, several under investigation by the FBI, one who's indicted, and one who went to prison. So, I mean, when you keep on going every 2 years, such high turnover, you get more problems like that too. That's just a natural statistical thing that's going to happen.
Right. You know, I've watched the UP political scene for a long time, and of course I remember Dominic Jacobetti and Joe Mack and Rusty Hellman and
But
Chuck
even
Varnum.
even then, when Dominic and those guys were serving for more than 30 years, the average time of service in the Michigan House was less than 10 years.
But didn't that really work to the advantage of the UP?
Oh, absolutely, for the Upper Peninsula, but it also worked to the advantage of other areas. but it was because the people here kept wanting to send those folks. And the reform that should have been looked at back then was, a guy like Dominic, and certainly good for the Upper Peninsula that he chaired appropriations all those years,
Right.
no argument. But if they wanted a reform that was going to say, you know what, you've had your turn, they could have said, you can't chair certain committees for that long. But if this area of the state wants to keep sending that individual knowing he can't chair that committee, that's their business. Why is that some other areas of the state's business who we decide to send to the legislature? Anyway, they should at least be lengthened. That's my main point. Is they're far too short at this point, and I'd hate to see it go on to the national level at this same shortness. At least make them 12 years or 16, so a person could learn the ropes and become good at the job and really service people, and not have the immediate pressures of ignorance and lack of experience drive his decisions, and then, oh, now you're done.
And we should point out, for those who don't know, a House member gets 3 two-year terms, so 6 years you're in or out. Somebody pointed out, it may have been you, that when you pick the House Speaker, you have your choice of either someone who's had 2 years experience or 2 years left to serve.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think the one they selected this time, the new House Speaker, has 2 years left to serve.
That's correct.
So he can only be there for 2 years.
Yeah, and he's a good man. And the men that I served with were men I respected and thought were good men and good leaders. But we've got a system that I believe is becoming more and more dysfunctional, and that's what we inherit. And without somebody really coming in and saying, okay, one of my main things is to eliminate this dysfunctionality, and term limits is part of that, so we need to referendum it, let the people reconsider this, and here's some reforms we could offer. That's not going to change.
I think some people wonder why, when we have one party with a super majority in the Senate, majority in the House, and the governor, that we still can't seem to get some things done. What causes that?
It takes, well, for one thing, it takes a supermajority. We don't have a supermajority in the House.
No.
So those issues remain out there, such as the road funding issue. Good Solutions took supermajority votes for constitutional questions. And then the minority says, well, you finally need us. Here's what we need in order to get on board, which is appropriate for them to do. But you also have varying degrees of opinion. I mean, try to get just 20 of your friends in a room together and discuss road funding, and it'd be hard-pressed to find 11 of them who'd agree on exactly what to do on a large, comprehensive bill.
Especially when it involves taking money out of their pocket.
That's right. So very challenging issues, and they're hard to get done. And they take time, and they take perseverance, and they take institutional knowledge that's very much lacking in the short-term memory of the House these days.
Okay. We'll get back to some more questions in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after this break. Again, we're talking with Ed McBroom, who just finished serving 6 years in the Michigan House of Representatives. As you look back, what are some of the things you look back on favorably that you feel good about?
Made a lot of great relationships. Really enjoyed working for the UP, especially with my fellow UPers, Reps Keevala and DeAnda, and Huki for a term, and certainly Senator Casperson. We had a great team working for the UP through some pretty tough times. The cold winter, the propane crisis, a lot of other tough times, the wolf issue, and the schools. And then I had great relationships in Lansing. I loved the work that I got to do, the people I got to work with. And if you think about legislatively, passed some important legislation to give more flexibility to students back in the classroom. Worked on some bills for midwives, and a bill that I think is a kind of a sleeper bill called deals with mens rea, the guilty mind, making sure that people don't become accidental criminals for violating some state rule that's promulgated by an agency, such, especially, just as benign as, well, you didn't put your name on your ice shack. Well, should you be a criminal for that? No. It establishes that there has to be negligence before you can be guilty, instead of a strict standard of guilt. It establishes there has to be some sort of state of mind that said, I'm committing this crime.
There were some things done in lame duck before you left. After at least a couple of years, they finally came up with an electric energy package, which you voted against.
Yeah, it was a really important issue, and many of us put a lot of hours in on that. I was on the Energy Committee with both Reps Keevala and DeAnda, and in the end, I was just disappointed with some of the parts of the product, especially how we were lied to by DT and consumers about some issues for the Upper Peninsula, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to reward that kind of behavior. We had some simple asks and amendments that we had been promised that they were okay with, and then they reneged on it and said they had never been okay with it. They just did it to fool with us. And you know, you can't, in my opinion, you can't reward that kind of bad behavior, especially from a big company like that that had such a vested interest in what passed.
What are some of the big issues left on the table that really are going to have to be dealt with by this legislature?
Well, there's certainly auto insurance is a huge one. I mean, we have ridiculously high costs in this state, and we can just look across the border and see what they have for less, and that's certainly an issue that really desperately needs attention. I believe we still need more flexibility in schools. It's still too much top-down, cookie-cutter, and I really want to see us do better for the arts in particular. That was something that was near and dear to me, that was in my initial bills. In the end, it didn't quite make it over the finish line. The career technical education, vocational did.
Right.
So there's many issues like that. We still need solutions for energy here in the UP, and there's a lot to do.
One of the big issues we hear much about are unfunded pension liabilities in
Yeah.
health care. Is this something the legislature is going to step forward on?
Well, I know they're going to try again. We did pass a bill in lame duck that will get us more information on the particulars of that to help the new legislature make better decisions. That was something we found was we didn't have enough details, but certainly something that needs to happen is a recognition that when you when you force a city to change the way it's funding its pensions, and you go to fully defined contribution, and then you accelerate the old plan forward, you accelerate the amortization, you say, well, now you have to pay it off in 15 or 12 or 10 or 8 years, and suddenly it just mushrooms into this enormous cost that they have to get over very quickly. I go to the people at the retirement services, and I'm like, the city of Gladstone's not going anywhere. Marquette County's not going anywhere. Why do they need to pay that all off right now? That's impossible. They have services they need to provide to the people who live here. It's not a reasonable expectation. And it's something that we could fix very simply, but there's just people who are real sticklers that we had to deal with who don't want to. It's got to be this way. This is what my book says it should be. And that's frustrating. So there's a lot that has to be done on that issue.
What's your future? I know the dairy farm, no matter what. I also know you have a teaching degree from Northern Michigan University. Any chance you might look at that again?
Well, one of the other hazards of term limits, of course, is during the short time that you're in there, you sacrifice what you were doing, and sometimes you can't get it back. In my case, my teaching certificate's expired,
okay,
and getting it back is an expensive prospect that I haven't ruled out, but I do plan to run for the Senate, and so if I'm successful at that, it wouldn't be practical to also be getting the certificate back just at that same time. You know, this happens to a lot of reps. They sell off their business, and it also keeps a lot of good people from running. But anyway, I plan to run for the Senate, and do some substitute teaching and keep directing the city band in the meantime.
You'll be running for Tom Casperson's seat when he's
That's correct.
term limited 2 years from now.
Yes.
You realize you'll be running against some of your former colleagues, probably.
I do, and it's just another shame of how this system works. I love the district I had. I love the team that we had to work with. I believe that I have things I can continue to offer to the Upper Peninsula and would love to continue service.
Okay.
But I'll certainly, there's good options on the table either way. So.
Okay. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much, Don.
I'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. You know, at the beginning of each year, Lake Superior State University issues what it calls the list of words it has banished from the Queen's English for misuse, overuse, and general uselessness. This marks the 42nd year that LSSU has carried out this annual tradition. I didn't find their list of words to be as interesting this year as I have in the past. That can mean one of two things. Either their list isn't as impressive this year, or perhaps I'm out of touch. I really haven't kept pace with the latest annoying words that have crept into our language today. But my intent this morning is not to talk about their latest list of words, which you can check out on the internet, but I do like to have my own fun with words, thinking about how confusing some things in our language can be. For example, L-I-V-E. Does he live here, or is your TV show live? Live or live? Same spelling, different pronunciation, and different meaning. Not all that confusing? How about this? You see what I mean? How about this? You're reading a story and see a line that says, he looked down at the pillow and saw a T-E-A-R. Could it be a tear, or could it be a tear? Very different meanings, not depending on spelling, but on how you pronounce the word. Speaking of reading, if you see the word R-E-A-D, it can mean read or read. Both spell the same, but again pronounced differently, while at the same time the words lead and led are spelled differently, L-E-A-D or L-E-D. Then, of course, there are those words that sound the same but have different spellings and meanings. The classic word in that category is there. T-H-E-I-R, T-H-E-R-E, and T-H-E-Y'-R-E. A lot of people get that one wrong, and it's not something that spell check on your computer will catch. Some words like fine, F-I-N-E, have several definitions. It can mean small or delicate, as in a very fine grain of sand. It can mean everything's okay, as in that's just fine. And if you go into court, it can mean trouble if the judge hits you with a fine. Some words can even have opposite meanings. How about the word left? If we said our friend just left, it means he's gone. But if we say there are two people left in the room, it means they're still here. To say nothing about left and right-handed. I think I've confused you enough for today. At least I know I'm confused. Time to say so long, which, as you know, is another way to say goodbye. Not sure why. And not to be confused with his closing thoughts this morning were so long. I'll be back in 2 minutes. That's our time for this week. The Today Show is coming up next. Keep in mind you can see the latest news anytime at UpperMichiganSource.com. You can also find this show at that same address. Thanks to Representative Ed McBroom for joining us today, and thank you for joining us. I hope we can see you again next Sunday morning.